There is no greater failure in the gacha genre than Tower of Fantasy. No gacha game to garner more hype, more anticipation, more acclaim, and then fail entirely to live up to any of it. Which is why I'm beginning my brand new series, The Rise and Fall of a Gacha Game, with Tower of Fantasy. Welcome to the very first episode of The Rise and Fall, a brand new video series where I document the rise of a gacha game and its inevitable fall into obscurity, or complete and utter failure, one game at a time. Tower of Fantasy, the very first Genshin killer, was revealed all the way back in June 2020. A friend of mine, Cry, and I both did videos on June 11, 2020, immediately following their announcement trailer. Players were excited. My first video on it got over 75,000 views and 468 comments. 2,273 likes as well. Excitement was evidently there. Players were hooked. The character customization looks fun. I'm interested. We need more sci-fi MMOs. I'm sold just on the hoverboards. That was sick. The vast majority of players received the game very positively. Then they proceeded to release several follow-up trailers. August, September, November. In November 2020, we got to see beta gameplay from China, which looked very promising. Once again, the video I did on the beta test got 82,827 views. It had 559 comments and 2,438 likes. What's this? Blue Protocol and Genshin Impact combined? I want to play. Far more interested in it now. Was only mildly interested before. Honestly, this looks like a lot of fun. I'm actually pretty excited. Once again, the vast majority of players received the beta test very positively. Fast forward to March 18, 2021, the developers of Tower of Fantasy had revealed their intent to overhaul a significant portion of their game now that they were closing in on a release. And it looked good. It looked very good. This was game-changing for Tower of Fantasy. It went from a cheap copy of Genshin to an actual competitor. The video I did on this garnered 106,584 views, 617 comments, and 3,200 likes. That's insane. Holy moly, what an upgrade. And don't even get me started on those animations. Really looks absolutely amazing. Really excited for this now. I hope this won't be a disaster because it's too good to be true. Oh, and what a disaster it would be. First in China, then in global. But let's keep going. Tower of Fantasy spent the remainder of 2021 releasing new footage, holding small-scale test phases within China, which I continue to cover, with videos garnering hundreds of thousands of views in total. During this time, Tower of Fantasy released a trailer for their game that sparked the inevitable series of events that would ultimately result in the state that it is currently in. The devs plagiarized Honkai Impact 3rd, one of the biggest, most beloved gacha games in the genre. The devs made a public statement. Due to our negligence, we failed to discover the problem of misuse of material and time, and as of now, the existing material in question has been arranged to be revised and updated. Further going on to shift blame to the company they outsourced their trailer to, rather than producing the trailer themselves. After verification, the reason for this problem is that the PV outsourcing process, the supplier used some material that is not in the game, and we did not find it in time during the review, so the misused material video was released normally. That did not go over well with global or Chinese gamers, but they apologized, so it was fine, right? They learned their lesson and nothing like this will ever happen again moving forward, since they'll no doubt do their trailers in-house rather than outsource it, right? Right? So about that. Before we go any further, I do want to take a moment here to thank all of my incredible patrons over on Patreon and my YouTube channel members who allow for me to continue to do dedicated videos like this every single day. You guys are absolutely phenomenal, and I genuinely cannot thank you all enough for the support. In December 2021, the same studio was caught plagiarizing once again. Not from another large studio or game this time, rather someone much smaller. This got so much attention that the devs themselves made a public statement confirming that they were in fact at fault. They apologized, and they proceeded to remove the trailer. After being outed twice for plagiarism, they have to have learned their lesson this time, right? This time they have to have. Shortly after release within China, Tower of Fantasy was bombarded with negative reviews. Players were very upset for numerous reasons: duplication issues, bugs, hackers. It was very poorly received. In an effort to combat this, the devs were caught by Redditors purchasing fake reviews on the App Store. They went to Genshin Impact Store, they copied all the recent reviews and just simply pasted them, replacing Genshin Impact with Tower of Fantasy. There are even notes made of Genshin's lack of PvP, Yoimiya, and more. This left a much more sour taste in players' mouths, further tarnishing the game's reputation. In April, Tower of Fantasy held their very first major global closed beta. I documented my journey throughout the test phase, spending quite the exorbitant amount of time within it. I thought it was really good. I thought it was really fun. Every other Gacha creator or MMO creator really was getting into the game, creating videos with their experiences. The game was booming, excitement was at an all-time high, and then I did a video titled Exposing Tower of Fantasy. This was not a negative video, especially since I was actively talking about how much fun I was having in game. This was a video to make sure every global player knew what they were getting into. I would rather warn my viewers, my community, of what could potentially happen, rather than sitting there silently and watching them slowly walk into the fire alone. I have your guys' backs, even if unfortunately it paints a target on mine. The next few months passed. I continued documenting the various stages the game went through, leading up to full release globally in the first half of August 2022. Tower of Fantasy ended up being streamed by every major Gacha and MMO creator around the world, and every single one of them got to bear witness to the horrific buggy mess that it was, with hackers abusing streamers, teleporting them around the world, dropping them out of the sky endlessly, exploiters taking advantage of bugs they knew existed, duplication issues that destroyed any chance of fair play. Any chance of a good first impression immediately went out the window. The first impression for release date, release week, was the scariest part about this is that there is no forum or even a place to report bugs, exploiters, or even in-game glitches. We only get an in-game customer service that literally doesn't do anything. Anyone who wants a game to succeed should be angered by this exploit situation. Hacking and cheating is not acceptable in any form or manner, and it should not be normalized by these intellectually challenged gamers, and I use that term very loosely for these types of people. Evidently, a lot of players were immediately deterred from playing at this juncture, and while the game was slowly repaired over the coming months, that didn't stop the game from shedding players faster than any other Gacha on record. Let's jump into September 2022. Tower of Fantasy was holding a brand new event, and the currency turned out to be ripped directly from Fate Grand Order, one of the largest Gacha games in the world. Naturally, this was noticed almost immediately. I know what you're thinking. Fate Grand Order doesn't own the rights to basic shapes, and you're right. But this was copied down to every last detail. The devs addressed this in their patch notes, stating that the Star Grit logo in the Path of Enlightenment event was fixed in a series of bug fixes. You heard that correctly. It was a bug. Sounds about right. Tower of Fantasy, for much of its life, was a PC mobile crossplay MMO gacha, until June 2023, when the devs confirmed not only would the game be coming to console, which triggered an enormous wave of excitement given how few decent gacha games are available on consoles, but the console release would be independent of its PC mobile iteration. In a tweet that took many players by surprise, the official English Tower of Fantasy Twitter stated that the Perfect World company confirmed that Tower of Fantasy will be released and operated as a standalone version on the PlayStation platform. On the official Tower of Fantasy website, they further elaborate on the PlayStation release, stating that after learning of this news, the global publisher immediately contacted Perfect World to clarify, and Perfect World verified that there will be no cross-platform connectivity. The shock came from players that realized the two companies responsible for the game had no communication whatsoever. Naturally, people were very upset with this news. That's one way to kill all the remaining hype, I guess. The point of multi-platform online game is that you can choose to play on any device while keeping your progress. How could they mess up so badly? Well, that's shitty. Ain't gonna invest S6 Lin all over again from the beginning, which is true. Anyone that spent time playing for any length of time on PC or mobile would have to start again from scratch. This is fine for new players, but for many returning players, there was no justification for negating their progress. Over the last 2 years, Tower of Fantasy continued to undergo repeated server merges, both on PC and mobile, along with, more recently, PlayStation. The most recent server merges took place in October 2024, right before what is arguably one of the largest announcements in the game's history. As per the official website, beginning February 23rd, the game will completely transition over to Perfect World Games, meaning Level Infinite, who publishes Tower of Fantasy currently, along with many other games like Nikke, will have no further connection with it. Hada Studios' parent company, Perfect World Games, will now independently operate every version. It was confirmed that if you don't transfer your account over manually, you'll lose everything on it, as the data will not be exported over to Perfect World. In light of this, the official global servers will shut down temporarily, while they undergo a full transition to Perfect World servers. Over the last 3 years of service, Tower of Fantasy has accomplished more than most gachas will in their lifetime. They managed over $550 million within China and global over the course of a 2-year period. They had millions of pre-registered players. They were the very first successful MMO gacha. They were the first real competition Genshin Impact would face. They provided us with many quality of life changes that should be present in current gacha games, but sadly are not. Unfortunately, with their repeated plagiarism, their exploits, hacks, server merges, declining player base, and revenue, continued mockery from every other gacha community, Tower Fantasy has all but faded into obscurity. Its developers are working on what is essentially the spiritual successor, Neverness to Everness, which looks like a very fun game from what I played during the beta, and the devs seem to have come a long way since Tower Fantasy launched. So, while Tower Fantasy is no doubt approaching the end of its life cycle, we at least have something more polished, more engaging, and arguably more fun to enjoy. Tower Fantasy could have been one of the biggest gacha games of all time. It's sad that it never had the opportunity to live up to its potential. Hey, where do you think you're going? I see what you're doing there. I see you navigating on over, scrolling on over to that X button. Don't you dare. What I need you to do is take a moment and click one of the videos that are about to appear as soon as I'm done talking. And trust me, you're gonna wanna.